beautiful Lord's day. It is gorgeous out there. I am so happy to be rid of some of the cold weather, and I'm so looking forward to the drought that's coming this summer. Maybe not, but I'm going to enjoy it while it's here, I'll guarantee. It's good to see everyone here this morning, all your smiling faces. I have been told on occasion that I have a rather twisted sense of humor. After this little illustration that I read you, it will remove all doubt. But I'm going to tell you I'm going to read you real quick from the Twisted Fairy Tales book that I have. Maybe you've heard this before, hope not, but I'm going to read you an account of the three bears. Kind of the way I figure it should have been written. But anyway, here we go. Once upon a time, there were three bears, Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and Baby Bear, who lived peacefully in the forest when one day Mama Bear cooked up some porridge. It was so hot, Papa Bear said, "My porridge is too hot." And Mama Bear said, "My porridge is too hot." And Baby Bear said, "My porridge is too hot." So Papa Bear said, "Let's take a walk so our porridge will cool off." So the three bears took a walk in the woods. Now, it just so happened that next to the forest there lived a spoiled, obnoxious little girl named Goldilocks, who was all about Goldilocks. She was rude, selfish, and disobedient to her parents. One day, to avoid her time out, she climbed out her bedroom window and ran off into the woods. As chance would have it, she stumbled upon the house of the three bears. Without so much as a knock or any semblance of manners, she just banged right in, and like she owned the place. Seeing three antique rocking chairs of great value, she sat down in Papa Bear's rocking chair and said, "This chair is too hard." She pushed it over in a tantrum. She then sat in Mama Bear's chair. "This chair is too soft," and she threw it against the wall. Then she sat in Baby Bear's chair and she said, "This chair is just right," and rocked it so furiously that it shattered under the abuse. As she got up from the floor, she saw on the kitchen table 3 bowls full of porridge. And with no thought as to whom they might have been prepared, she grabbed a spoon and dug in. Now, Papa Bear's porridge was too hot, and when she burned her lips, because she had a huge spoonful she tried to throw down, she spewed it all over the table. "This porridge is too hot." Then she tasted Mama Bear's porridge and pushed the bowl, spilling it, and said, "This porridge is too cold." Tasting Baby Bear's bowl, she said, "Yes, this porridge is just right." And she ate it up like the little pig she was. All that destructive activity and pigging out made her so tired that she continued snooping around the house in which she had no business for a place to crash, and upstairs found the three bears' bedroom. Climbing into Papa Bear's bed with her dirty, forest-stained clothes, she wallowed around and exclaimed, "This bed's too hard." She ripped off the sheets. Mama Bear's bed, she just jumped on it up and down with her muddy shoes, testing it, and found it, "This bed's too soft." And then she saw Baby Bear's bed, and from Mama Bear's bed took a flying Melinda into the Baby Bear's bed, breaking all 4 pedestals, and sighed, "This bed's just right," and she fell asleep with her stomach full and exhausted. Now, a little later, the three bears came home, and they walked in. Papa Bear noticed that something was not right and said, "Someone's knocked over my chair." And Mama Bear observed, "Well, someone put a huge ding in my chair and in the wall." And Baby Bear saw what the remains was of his chair, crying, said, "Someone just flat out trashed my chair." Moving to the kitchen, Mama Bear said, "Someone spilled my porridge all over the tablecloth." And Papa Bear noticed it too and said, "Yes, and it's slimy." And Baby Bear just asked, "Where's my porridge?" Now, Papa Bear was concerned that a vandal might have entered, and so he went upstairs very quietly, and he found his bed and said, "Who messed up my bed?" and got it all dirty. And Mama Bear asked, "Why is my bed so muddy?" And Baby Bear whispered, "Check this out." About that time, Goldilocks woke up and noticed the three bears and tried to make a run for it, but Papa Bear smacked her down and they ate her. Now, the three bears were happy because no one else would ever again have to deal with a spoiled little black brat named Goldilocks, and they were no longer hungry anymore for porridge. The end. Now, when my granddaughter stopped crying, I told her, "No one likes a selfish little person." Now I'm going to tell you a different three bear story. But this one's real. It's not a joke or a spin on some old fairy tale. This is about three bears that Christians are called upon to live. And it is much more serious and much more critical. Fact is, this is the way in which we in our culture, in our country, in our community can be a light to those who are all about me. We can do a great work if we are willing to make the sacrifices necessary for these three bears. Obviously, the first one is in the first couple of verses. We are to bear, verse 2, one another's burdens. Saving souls is a sacrifice. I guess that's why it is very difficult. Many churches really struggle, squander opportunities. Kind of, conundrum is, how are we losing? Why are we growing smaller? Because there is a sacrifice to be made in winning souls. It is a sacrifice that we have to come to grips with as mature Christians so that we can do those things we should do in order to have others be willing to become the Christians they should be. All we're doing is following Christ, of course, in this example, because Christ left everything, if you read Philippians 2, verses 5 and following. Christ left everything. He sacrificed everything because He loved you and He loved me. And so, therefore, He was willing to bear others' burdens. It's too often the case, I think, that the inconvenience of others and their problems, their woes, and their circumstances are such that we just don't have time to deal with it. And such is not the attitude of a Christian. We ought to bear with one another. We ought to put up with things sometimes. Now, this is not the condescending kind of bearing with someone where we take on this self-righteous, holier-than-thou robe and say, yes, I'm going to be the mature Christian. I'll just put up with your immaturity and your sin. That's not bad at all. Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Do you ever notice that not one time did Jesus vaunt Himself or proclaim Himself other than the fact that He was God's Son? He didn't brag about it. He didn't come in purple robes, which He very well could have because He was the maker of the earth. No, He came as a lowly carpenter. I'm not sure what the reputation of the carpenter was back in that day, but evidently it wasn't way up there with the Pharisee and the Sadducee. But that's where He came. And He came here to sacrifice Himself so that you and I would have a hope of eternal life. I'm so grateful that He couldn't just always think about all Himself, and that He thought about you and me and loved us enough that He gave His life for us. Rescuing the perishing can be kind of wearisome. You'll notice in chapter 6, verse 9, let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season you'll reap if you do not lose heart. I mean, there's several times when I note, for instance, Mark 9:19, where Jesus got frustrated. And I guess it's the case that people feel a little bit guilty about being frustrated or disappointed. Not just with the world out there, because we know how the world is, but even with our own brethren. We get frustrated and disappointed. Jesus did. There's no sin in that. It's a natural response when somebody doesn't live up to what they should be. It's a natural thing. In Mark 9:19, evidently the apostles had gone out and were doing all kinds of miracles because Jesus had given them the power to do so. But there was this one fellow had a kid that had demons in him and they couldn't get him out. And came to Jesus, and notice His response in Matthew 9:19. How long, O faithless generation, am I going to have to put up with you guys? That's frustration. You can see the same kind of thing in Matthew 11:28, as He stood over Jerusalem and said, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killeth the prophets, I would have gathered you in like a mother hen gathers her chicks in under her wings, and you would not." Being frustrated, to me, and the way I read the Bible, is a sign that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, that your attitude is the way it should be. Because we should get frustrated when those we love and care about are not doing what they should do. But the fix for that is we bear one another's burdens. We don't accommodate, we don't enable. Jesus never did that. In fact, frankly, He was there to point out where things were wrong, but He was there to help them get out of the problems they were in. That's bearing each other's burdens. You help them carry whatever burden is keeping them from being who they need to be. If we're going to be the Christians we ought to take this first bear pretty seriously. The second one is very akin to it, but it's reverted as far as direction. Instead of worrying and concerning ourselves about others, we need to worry and concern ourselves about ourselves. In verse 5, every one or each one shall bear his own load. it is a fact, and every time, I see a young lady who is about to have, and we talked about it a little bit, and I just bugged her a while ago, about to have a little child. Oh, what a wonderful thing. But you know what? That's going to be 18 years of burden. And we're going to learn about bearing burdens. And of course, I've had older and wiser parents tell me, oh, it doesn't end in 18 years sometimes. Well, I understand that too. But certainly we have to bear our own burdens. We have to own it. We have to be willing to take the responsibilities for ourselves for what we do. We live in a culture that is so quick to blame. Boyce mentioned it in class. I just got to reiterate in class, in the idea of prosecuting someone for doing something wrong, and their mantra is, you're ruining my career. No, I'm not ruining your career. You made the decision as a free moral agent to do something that was terribly wrong, and you've ruined your career. I'm merely pointing it out. And thus we see how difficult it is sometimes to bear our own burdens, because we are merely doing what God says, and very often it will be the case that when you do what God says, those around you who do not are going to be offended at you, and they're going to be angry with you, and it's going to be tough. But you know what? We need to bear it. We need to bow up. We need to be the people we should be as Christians and bear those burdens. We cannot, I think, sometimes appreciate bearing our own burdens in a way in which we own it. There's a shortage of owning in our culture today. And sometimes, and we mentioned this in class too, we give people and we try to do for people, and I think we've got our culture all messed up here in this country because we've got so many freebies out there. There are people who will not go get a job because they can get more from the government free, and then they can sit and watch and play on their devices that the government's given them. And why in the world would you go out and work? Because there's so much free today. I can't speak for anybody else, but as an example of some of that, when I was a kid, my dad, he was harsh and cruel, and he was a child abuser. And he made me buy my own car. He didn't just buy one and give it to me. Not that that's terribly wrong. A gift to a child is fine, but he made me buy my own car. And not only that, he put restrictions on what I could buy. He made me buy a rebuild VW Beetle Bug that my Uncle Bub had rebuilt. And so, because it was mine and I owned it, I began to revise my Beetle. And I took all the liner out of it, floor and the ceiling and everything, and I put, with glue, carpet glue, I put big pile brown shag carpeting all over the floor. And it looked so good. And this was my Bug. I bought it. So it looked so good that I put it on the ceiling too. Took the liner out and I glued it to the ceiling. And then I thought it would look pretty and I put it on the dash. Not only that, on the front hood, because the engine's in the back, I put on the front hood this big chrome swan with big yellow wings that when I turned my park lights on, the wings would light up. So I drove around town. Now there was two things that happened. Number one, my father was grossly ashamed of me and told me so on frequent occasion. What were you thinking? I said, Dad, I bought it. It's mine. He said, yes, it is. Look what you're doing with it. And the other thing, there's no anonymity when you're driving around a Volkswagen with a big swan on the front with wings. I mean, everybody saw me coming miles away. I couldn't do anything and get away with it because they knew what car that was. But we need to own it. And sometimes what we own doesn't look pretty. And I was told by several people in town, that's embarrassing, son. That does not look pretty. Owning it doesn't just mean, well, I did that, yeah, I did it, and I'm proud of it. In fact, it's an odd thing, isn't it, that Christians will look back at their sinful life, and the idea of owning it is going back there and glamorizing and glorifying all those sins they committed. But now I'm a Christian, and I don't do anything that's fun anymore. Because back then I was a heathen, and this is what I did. I can't believe people would look at their past like that. In Romans 6:16 or 6:21, that's one of the questions that Paul asked the Romans. Why are you going back and living like you used to do? That's not owning it. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, but falling short of the glory of God is nothing to be proud of. Owning it is not going back and glorifying your past. And he asked those Romans, those things you used to do that you're ashamed of, why are you going back and doing them again? You know, part of owning the fact that we are sinners does not mean that we glorify that sin. No, it means we change that sin. Because we're going to own it, we're going to understand that's who we used to be and not allow our past to define who we are today. We need to bear our own burdens. It is not anybody else's fault that I am who I am. It's my fault. I made choices. And there are all kinds of mitigating circumstances. There's rationalizations as long as a mile. But you know, when it comes right down to it, I made the choice. I need to own it. And when you go to God with that, I'll guarantee you get a new appreciation and a deep appreciation of grace. And you understand, yes, I am a sinner. By the way, there's no comfort in the mantra, well, all have sinned, so if I sin, it's no big deal. No. No, all have sinned is just a statement of fact, putting you in a category of folks that are lost if they don't fix that problem. We need to own our own load, carry our own load, bear our own burden. The last one is found in verse 17. Paul is writing this chapter. I appreciate you reading the entire chapter. There's so many neat things in here I won't get to, but in verse 17, he was telling them all, from now on let no one trouble me, for I bear in my body the marks of Lord Jesus. You know, when you choose to be a Christian, you must understand that you are going to bear some burdens because you're a Christian. And I mean just because, for no other reason, you're a Christian. You need to buck up and realize that's the case. When you choose to belong to God, there will be some burdens you have to bear. I kind of have a relationship with that kind of, and the idea of my illustration is about, coaching Little League. I kind of lost my voice. I had quite the voice until I coached Little League, and when you yell across the field or across the basketball court, it ruins your vocal cords, so it seems. But I can understand that, and I came across this illustration because there was this point where the coach was really feeling, he was coaching Little League, and he called the 7-year-old up to his bench, and he says, now, Junior, I want to ask you a question. Do you understand that this is a cooperation? It's a team effort. And the kid, 7-year-old, yes, sir, sure know that. He said, well, do you understand that what really matters is not if we win or lose, it's how you play the game as a team. We come together as a team. And he said, yes, I understand that. He said, then you understand that when the referee calls a foul, that you don't go up and argue with him and curse him and attack the referee and call him an idiot. And he said, yes, that's true. Yes, I understand that. He said, okay, do you also know that because we want to play everybody, that when I call you off the floor and put you on the bench and another child goes out, that you don't come to the bench saying that the coach is a total moron, the little boy nodded. He said, yes, I understand that. He said, great. Now, would you go over to the stands where your mama's sitting and explain that to her? You know, you're going to have persecutions as a Christian because there is a leadership role you take without question. And this is just, it comes with the job, okay? When you decide to be a Christian, Jesus says you're a light in the world. You're salt. Everybody's going to see you, and what they ought to be tasting ought to taste good. That's who you should be. And when you are that, guess what your reward is? A slap on the back, a thank you so much, I really appreciate it? No, that's not what you're going to get. You're going to get, why are you judging me? Or we don't want you around because I can't tell the dirty joke in this crowd that everybody can laugh at when you're here because you put a damper on everything because you do things right. My friends, if we're going to bear in our body the marks of Jesus Christ, it's going to be because we stand up for truth. And that means we're going to stand up for truth, whether it's people in the world, because you know what to expect from them, or whether it's people in the church, which you wouldn't expect that from them, or whether it's our own family. And I can relate to that. I have close members of my family over which my soul grieves because they have mocked me and ridiculed me and they put me down on every occasion. And do you know why? It's because, not because I'm ugly. I'm not ugly to them. I'm not harsh to anyone in my family. It's because I'm a Christian and I stand for the truth. That's what I signed up for. And I understand going in, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be a light when the darkness gets overwhelming that somebody can come to and say, here's a guy that stands for truth. He will give you the right answer because he gets his answers from God. You and I need to understand that that's who we are. We are cross bearers. 2 Timothy 3:12 states point blank, if you're going to be a Christian, you're going to suffer persecution. And to that I would add, if you're not suffering persecution because of your Christianity, you need to rethink your dedication to God. Because if you're not so dedicated that people, friends, family, anybody in the world knows who you are, then you need to shine brighter. Because that's what you signed up for. And yes, you will be abused. But you know what? This one here, this bear, bearing the marks of Christ, this is the one I call Baby Bear. And you know why? Because as I read God's Word in the revelation of a place I've never been to, and I think about how wonderful heaven is going to be, what's a little suffering now? I was an athlete as a younger man, a poor one, but I was an athlete. But I understood the sacrifices you made throughout the week, practicing football in the grass burrs, so that you could get out on the field for that tiny moment of possible glory and the joy of being on a team that comes out a winner. I understand what sacrifice is, to feel the glory of people being so proud of you and coming up, grass burrs and all, and hugging you because they are proud you did a good job at something. You know, you have that same kind of emotion when you do a good job at work. When you do a good job as a father or a mother in your family, having a kid come up and tell you, Daddy, I love you, just melts the heart. I know this. So what's a little suffering right now? Rib, compared to the glories of heaven. Paul would tell Timothy in his second epistle, I've fought a good fight, finished the course, kept the faith. Henceforth is laid up for me a crown of glory. It's all going to be worth it. And when you look at what Paul went through, trust me, I've suffered persecution. I actually did almost have a fellow hit me because he didn't like the truth I was teaching. But he didn't. Paul went down the wall in a basket trying to escape death. He was stoned and left for dead. There were folks that left him. Oh, I can't imagine the sadness. Demas hath forsaken me, having loved this present world. I can't even imagine the heartbreak, the rending of Paul's innards when he had to say that by inspiration. Yeah, a little suffering right now. Oh, it's going to be worth heaven. I can't imagine what it is that we might go through on this earth that would be so important that it caused me to say, yeah, I want to enjoy that right now because I don't mind going to hell for an eternity over it. And ain't nothing on the planet like that. I will bear. I encourage you to bear one another's burdens. Bear your own load, because if you don't do it, somebody else is going to have to pick up, and they're going to have to bear it. And bear the marks of Christ because you are a Christian. Those are the three bears a Christian should be aware of and understand. Now, if you're not a Christian, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not an easy chore. It's tough. Okay? When you decide to become a Christian, just be advised. For everyone from your, the stranger on the street all the way to your closest kinfolk may not like what you do and may be a source of persecution for you. I understand that might be the case, but let me tell you, they ain't going to be nothing like heaven. And that's where we're headed. If you're not headed to heaven, I would recommend three bears. If you would, respond to the invitation this morning. We invite you to the song we sing. Won't you stand?